Experience a progressive lens engineered with AI from Essilor, powered by individual measurements of your visual behavior. A lens personalized to you by an Essilor expert. Discover Verilux XR Track and enjoy instantly sharp vision in motion and seamless transitions from near to far. Find your local Essilor expert today at Essilor.com.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the county chair of the Suffolk Republican Party as well as the vice chair of the state Republican Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With us today in the studio is my good friend and colleague, a great lawyer, Christian Brown. Christian was a former assistant district attorney in Manhattan, appeared before me a number of times over the years, a great lawyer, political commentator, essayist, smart lawyer, does very important cases in the state of New York. And I'm very honored and privileged to have him with us today, Jesse. So I want to begin. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for your kind introduction.
So I want to talk about, because this is becoming truer and truer, Jesse, and I'm very concerned about this. I think we've seen the collapse of Pax Americana, the world peace that was orchestrated by the United States of America. It's fallen apart. The world is a far more dangerous place today, Jesse, and it's all because of the policies of Barack Obama and Joe Biden, the secretaries of state, Kerry and Blinken. It's an awful situation wherever we turn. If we have any hope at all of saving civilization and international peace, it has to be by getting around and away from these apologists who do not understand that you have to exercise power to make other places responsible and keep them in check. What are your thoughts, Jesse?
My thoughts are, we've shared this. This decline in Pax Americana is a result of the policies that began truly under President Obama and now continue through this Biden administration, which we affectionately refer to as the third term of the Obama administration. It's a complete first, it's an apology tour of America, followed by the complete withdrawal of America as a global leader, both diplomatically, economically, and militarily. This is what we're witnessing today is the results, the catastrophic results of when America and its politicians and leaders withdraw from the world stage. They create a vacuum. And that vacuum right now we're watching in real time is being filled by enemies of America, the new axis of evil, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, and they're partnering in with countries that are not allies with us in the West, in the Western Hemisphere, such as Venezuela and Cuba. The fact that the Biden administration has demonstrated the fact that they're not going to engage, they're going to appease, they're going to continue to move red lines all over the place. They're going to allow incursions, a small incursion in Ukraine, as Biden said was okay to Russia, signaling to Russia. All that is creating chaos in the world stage, a vacuum of the world stage being filled by the enemies of America, and also our allies. Just taking the case of Israel, they don't know if America is their ally today or not. That's a disastrous combination because, there are those maybe within our nation that will say that, well, that's not our business. That's the Middle East business. That's Europe's business. The fact of the matter is, if we do not go back to being a global leader, both economically, diplomatically, and from a military national security point of view, that this country, our great nation, is going to be surrounded, and we're not going to have any allies left.
I think that's exactly right. Chris, what do you think?
Well, I agree with you, and I think it does largely go back to President Obama's infamous apology tour, which if you reflect back on it, was a rather really rather bizarre exercise that he went through. And of course, at the time, the media covered over, the import of what he was saying. But I don't know of any other president who would have gone into foreign countries and, basically denigrated his own nation and his own society. And I think that's sort of the framework through which the current administration, appears to view the world. And I agree with your sentiments that, America withdrawing from a position of strength, not to be the world's policeman, but to show that, the United States will not tolerate aggression and threats from bad actors, of course, is led to all of this terrible chaos. And it's very, very dangerous because the Russians have nuclear weapons. The Iranians, from what I understand, are quite close to getting nuclear weapons. And you could foresee a very terrible circumstance that many people thought that was an artifact of history with the end of the Cold War. But unfortunately, I don't think it is. Well,
the problem is in that debate between then Governor Romney and Barack Obama, when Obama was running for the second term, in the most condescending, self-righteous, annoyed tone that Obama was capable about, that kind of preachy professorial condescension, he said the Cold War is over. He totally missed the point. There will always be Cold Wars that can get hotter when you have adversaries who have ambitions to control the world or their piece of the maps in their areas. You will always have Cold Wars, and it has to be checked and it has to be balanced. The great leaders of history understood that, whether it was Metternich or whether it was Bismarck. It matters who's controlling the checkboard, what the checks and balances are, because there are consequences for all these actions. So, for example, you take Barack Obama. Both Jesse and Chris have alluded to, the apologies, all starting with Obama. Obama signaled weakness. He's signaled regret for the United States being a major player. More importantly, he went about unbalancing the balance of power. So the direct cause of the problems we are in today is a direct result of the presidency of Barack Obama. Now, I'm not going to say he's an Islamist. I'm not going to say that some people would characterize him as that. What I am saying is he believed that he needed to retool the Middle East and build up Iran. So while he may not be an Islamist himself, as he's been criticized for being, and I don't say he is, he certainly is an apologist for that kind of mindset, and that has led to the resurgence of Islamists across the world, whether it's ISIS, whether it's Houthis, whether it's Hezbollah, whether it's Hamas, whether it's Islamic Jihad. It doesn't matter the name of these groups. It doesn't matter whether they're Shia or the Sunni. There's a view that somehow there should be a resurgence and domination by Islamist fundamentalists, which, by the way, is a threat to more moderate, centrist, common sense, rational actors in the Middle East who are themselves Muslims. For example, Jordan, for example, Egypt, for example, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, other places like that, who wanted peace, were going along with the Abraham Accords. Saudi Arabia was on the cusp of entering into it when they had this attack by Hamas. And now the world is coming apart. As we're talking amongst the three of us today, this war is heating up. And all the pressure that Biden is placing on the state of Israel and Netanyahu for a unilateral ceasefire is to give a victory, a win, to Hamas, which is a designated terrorist organization, which is sponsored by, controlled by, funded by, given armaments by the key national player of terrorism amongst the nation states, which is Iran. Your thoughts, Jesse?
You're absolutely correct. And, we've spoken about this on the show previously. Right now, what's unfortunate is that America's foreign policy is being dictated by the politics of at least one, maybe two states, Michigan and the Squad. I am offended, and I cannot believe that just earlier this week, at a demonstration in Dearborn, Michigan, there was a 1-hour rally in support of Hamas, where they weren't just chanting "Death to Israel," but they were chanting "Death to America." Takek Bazi organized this demonstration, and he said it was in honor of the former Iranian Ayatollah Khomeini. And what did we do? We heard, as of taping of this show, there has been silence from the Squad in Congress. There's been silence from Governor Whitmer of Michigan. We've gotten from the press secretary's podium a weak condemnation of these words and these actions. But what does it say? Where is our president? Where is Chuck Schumer? Where is the leaders of the Democratic Party? Where's our governor, our mayor of the city of New York? Where are these Democratic leaders and lawmakers to stand up and say and condemn those words? That right now is systematic of the problems we're facing domestically and, of course, what we're facing on an international stage. How can we not condemn in the loudest, strongest voice death to America and death to our top partner and democracy in the Middle East, Israel? It's abhorrent, it's wrong, and these are issues that together is why I believe Americans of all stripes, of all backgrounds, are going to rise up this November election and say, we want to make sure America is here for its 300th anniversary. And the only way to do that is to throw out these progressives and throw out weak leaders like Joe Biden.
Chris?
I just want to pick up on a point you made, Judge, on when you referenced Metternich and Bismarck, the great diplomats of the past. It's not all about saber rattling and threatening everyone all the time. Some of it is about smart diplomacy. And I think that people are beginning to look back at some of the history of what has gone on in the Obama days through Biden. I heard Professor Jeffrey Sachs of Columbia, who is not exactly a right-winger. He's an MSNBC type of guest. And he just dismantled what happened in the Obama years, largely under Biden's watch, with the incompetent diplomacy that went on with respect to Ukraine, not defending Putin or his invasion, which is terrible and wrong. But there were just foolish and reckless types of incompetence that went on. That's also a factor in this. The inability to think clearly and realistically, as you said, Judge. There's always going to be bad actors. There's always going to be cold wars. There's always going to be countries that have spheres of influence or seek spheres of influence. And you have to be, wise as a serpent to make sure that the powers are balanced and that you don't do foolhardy things that put you in a situation, as I said before, where now, there's a nuclear armed power who is in what it sees as an existential fight for its survival. It's very, very dangerous.
Well, that's very interesting because Gerard Baker of the Wall Street Journal had an article this week in the Journal in his column. And he said, people who think that this is just Israel's fight are missing the key point. Israel is just the beginning of this process. Israel is fighting the fight for Western civilization. As Jesse has pointed out, it is a democracy. It is our ally. If Israel goes under, all of the balance of power in the Middle East will be unraveled. What's going to happen is you're going to have Iran making the move. Iran has been on the march. Iran will consolidate its power. And then the big fight in the Middle East will be amongst who picks up the pieces. And my prediction is, my sad prediction, I hope I'm wrong, then the fight becomes between Iran and Turkey, each of whom sees themselves as the power that's entitled to be the dominant force in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia may have a lot of oil, But believe me when I tell you, Saudi Arabia is not able to defend itself unless it's under the wing of the United States of America and Israel. And you don't have to love the state of Israel or the Jewish community to understand one of the reasons Israel is so important to the United States is it's a source of national security intelligence, technology, economic development that's good for the United States. If Israel is off the map, if the Islamist extremists, the people who want to destroy Israel from the river to the sea, who want to exterminate the Jewish community in Israel take over, what's going to happen is the next round will be between Iran and Turkey. Saudi Arabia is going to have to pick a side which one is going to be the protector because they're not capable of being the balance of power on their own. They just pump oil. And all the other states will fall into line. And then you're going to see an interesting phenomena because if Iran has nuclear weapons and Turkey has nuclear weapons, what happens there? Because neither one of them have any great love for the other and see each other as rivals. So this is an unraveling game. Kevin, who's back, who's done a drop-in today, is just giving me a signal we have to take a break. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, distinguished attorney, commentator, and essayist Christian Brown. Please stay with us. We'll be right back for more of Let the Record Show.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never-frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code listen50 for 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50. Code listen50. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Psst, healthcare pros, word's out, and it's too good to keep quiet. Look, LinkedIn is revolutionizing job hunting, making it possible to search by specialty, shift preference, and salary. Endless scrolling is out. Whether it's a mental health therapist or dental hygienist, finding the perfect role is faster and easier than ever. Head to linkedin.com/healthcare and start your search today.
Clorox Sentiva smells like lavender. Cleans like Clorox. And feels like...
All right, that could go on for a while. Experience the long-lasting freshness of Clorox Sentiva. Available in Clorox Sentiva Lavender Scented Bleach. Use as directed.
Are we still on the trail? Is this pack getting heavier? More switchbacks? Why am I doing this?
At REI Co-op, we believe there are places within ourselves.
Just a little further. You got this.
That we find only outside.
Wow. Look at the stars. This is incredible.
We have the gear, inspiration, and advice to help you get there. REI Co-op. Visit rei.com.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We are back on Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the vice chair of the state Republican Party here in New York, as well as the county chair in Suffolk County. With us as our guest in the studio is Christian Brown, a noted attorney, commentator, essayist, a great lawyer, and I had the privilege of having him appear before me many times in court in Manhattan when I was a criminal court and Supreme Court judge, and he was an assistant DA, and just a terrific commentator on very important issues. Gentlemen, I want to raise this question. It was alluded to earlier in the first segment, but tell you what's being lost, and I don't know why it's being lost, Jesse and Chris, but does anyone remember that Putin has invaded the Ukraine? Has anybody thought about the fact that we're not doing in the United States what we need to do to fund them and support them properly? I don't understand. How did that get blown off the front pages and the coverage? Jesse? And why is it important that Putin and his territorial ambition of Russia to resurrect the Soviet Empire? Why is it important that we confront that, Jesse?
Well, it's important that we confront it, but let's answer your first question first. Why has it been knocked off the front pages? Why has it been knocked off the consciousness of the American people or the consciousness of American lawmakers and leaders? Simply because Biden continues to bungle foreign policy. It's one bungle after another. He did it by going slow into providing aid to Ukraine when the first incursion and the invasion began more than 2 years ago. It continues to this day because American allies around the world are looking at themselves and puzzledly at the United States as they approach on how the Biden is approaching the Israeli-Hamas conflict. I mean, the Biden administration is telling and directing Israel on how to defend its people. No one told America how to defend its people after 9/11, and no one should have. We were attacked, just like Israel was attacked. They have a responsibility and a sworn oath to protect their people, their citizens, and that's what they're doing. They are advocating a ceasefire where Hamas books nothing but a win politically. Hamas does nothing but doesn't even give off 100 hostages. 6 at the last count that are still Americans are being to be turned over, and Hamas has rejected every peace or ceasefire offering that the UN or even the United States has put forward. This is a complete embarrassment. So to answer to your question, it's one Biden bungle on the foreign policy after another that has knocked off these hotspots. Why aren't we speaking about the China Seas? Why are we not talking about Taiwan as China continues to surround Taiwan? Because it's one foreign policy bungle after another to which I am saying on a global stage, America and her allies are being surrounded because of the ineffectiveness and the bungling of the Biden administration.
I think that's well said. I think the problem, Chris and Jesse, is this. They don't understand the big picture. They look at these as isolated instances instead of looking at the term of art that you and I use often, Jesse, the axis of evil, in a very well-coordinated effort to undermine us wherever we have power. They're trying to encircle us. They're doing it all of the time. They've moved in Chinese military-aged men in the thousands into Guam, Jesse, into Guam. What does that do to destabilize that Pacific area? It's a big deal. They've moved in, as you pointed out, in Venezuela and Cuba and Nicaragua. There goes the Monroe Doctrine. So they're just a few miles away from our shores. China is on the march. China is looking at this and says, well, if Putin gets away with his territorial ambitions where people are saying, well, give him a piece of Ukraine and we'll buy peace, or just have a unilateral ceasefire, Israel, and everything will be fine, and they go back. So who are the winners in this game of chess? We keep losing important strategic positions and allies. And the message, by the way, that the Biden administration and the Obama administration have orchestrated is that the United States of America is not a dependent friend or ally. They will consistently sell out those who have fought with them. Look how they abandoned Afghanistan, for God's sakes. All those people who worked with us put their lives on the line, their families' security on the line. They're being exterminated. You have the resurrection of ISIS because of that, which is now a threat not just to the Middle East, but to Europe and to America. Chris, what do you think?
Well, with respect to the Ukraine situation, I about a month ago, I participated in a special mass that Cardinal Dolan had at St. Patrick's, was in conjunction with an organization I'm involved with called the Aid to the Church in Need. All of the Ukrainian Catholic leaders from Ukraine were in New York. They came to St. Patrick's. The the Metropolitan Archbishop of Kyiv gave the homily. A lot of it he spoke in Ukraine because there were a tremendous number of Ukrainians in the church, including some of their soldiers. It is not a Biden administration talking point that the Ukrainians are a real country. They will fight to the last man. They were defiant. The Archbishop held up a piece of shrapnel that had hit his own house, and he had several pieces. He gave one to Cardinal Dolan as a memento. So their determination is a real thing. The injustice that they are suffering is a real thing. The problem, as I see it now, is now that this catastrophe has occurred, I mean, what exactly is the way to solve this? We're apparently not doing enough to knock Russia out of there. And people say, well, it's not Americans that are dying, it's Ukrainians. Well, that's not really a moral position. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians and Russians have died. It's a bloodbath. It's a terrible, terrible thing that's happening. And what are we doing about it?
Where's the demand, Chris, at the United Nations or at the White House for an immediate unilateral ceasefire by Russia?
Well, exactly. I mean, pick a strategy. Either work to defeat them or come up with a plan to achieve a peace. But you can't go on this way. I am not the only one to say, but if it goes on this way, there won't be a Ukraine left. It's a complete and total World War I style carnage.
Well, in a war of attrition, Russia will win because they have more bodies to die. It makes no sense. Jesse, what are your thoughts on that?
As I said, I think that, listen, in both these regions, Ukraine and Russia, and also Israel and Hamas, these are allies that are fighting wars we don't want to fight here on our shores. And as I said earlier, I do believe that the Biden administration was slow. And Judge, you and I spoke about this in the early parts of our show first coming on air, which almost coincided with the Russia-Ukrainian war starting. Biden was slow to provide aid, both humanitarian aid, military aid. They held back certain aids because they did not want to influence anything, a situation. Just think of it. This situation and America's position, other nations are recognizing the aggression. They're recognizing it this way. Finland, which for time immemorial has wanted to stay neutral and has never wanted to join one of the alliances. They wanted to stay neutral in Europe. After and following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, what did they do? Almost immediately, they petitioned to become a new member of NATO. That is what we're seeing here. We're seeing even in China. We're going to get into China a little bit. The more atrocities could not have been inflicted upon through history in World War II and beyond, and earlier, between the old Japanese Empire and the Philippines. The Philippines the Philippine government concerned about the expansion of China in the South China Sea.
As is Vietnam and Japan.
Exactly. They're now seeking that Japan change its constitution so that they can become militarized and to the teeth, to advance their military defense posture. Why? Because there's an absence of leadership by the United States. This is our problem. And listen, I understand there are good reasons that our lawmakers have questioned whether or not, or the purpose of these funds. And, we could talk about corruption. We knew there's corruption. I mean, Joe Biden, when he was vice president, threatened the president of Ukraine, hey, unless you get rid of this prosecutor, you're not getting $1 billion in aid.
So much for his concern about corruption.
Yeah, there is a legitimate concern about corruption. But as we've learned, this aid package, especially military aid, goes to United States defense contractors. I do believe that our leaders, if they want to stand up, we should have two standalone bills to aid these two allies, a Ukrainian package and an Israeli package, and we should move them forthright. Raise your hand and we can declare, are we with our allies or are we against our allies?
There's so much at stake, and if we don't stand with the Ukraine and with Israel, there's going to be an enormous price to pay. And you've just indicated, as has Chris, the next move is going to be by China. They're looking at how this unfolds, and they will make a move against Taiwan. And by the way, they could very easily, given the way they played this chessboard, they could make that move between now and the November election, because the prospect of having Trump in the White House, who would act as a check against their aggression, this is the time for them to act in an aggressive fashion, gentlemen. And I'm very concerned about that. And China is on the march. Look at the incursions China has done against the United States. Number one, they fly the balloons over our military bases.
Yes.
And Biden does nothing to try to cover it up. And if you didn't have a private citizen taking pictures of it, that never would have been revealed. Next, they're buying up all the farmland. Next, they've infiltrated the universities, and they're paying off the institutions with centers which they fund, and professors and administrators who they're buying off to look the other way, to be apologists for China. People forget how many millions of people in the world died and how many millions of Americans, over 1 million Americans, died because of COVID. And where did COVID come from? It didn't come from Israel, and it didn't come from the Ukraine. It came from China. And don't tell me it came from a wet market, gentlemen. It came out of a lab that was run by the military of the Communist Party in China. This is a very, very big deal, and China's never been held accountable for it. And what about, by the way, if that wasn't close enough to home, what about that lab, Jesse and Chris, they found out in California where they had all kinds of viruses, which was run by the Chinese? I mean, I hate to sound paranoid, but when people are out to get you, maybe you should start paying attention to it. Chris.
Don't forget about the police station in Sunset Park.
Oh, and a police station in Sunset Park.
But look, you do get the feeling that the Chinese are very crafty. They're very serious people. They have their goals. They're advancing their goals. And you get a little bit of a sense, unfortunately, that what are we doing? We're arguing about wokeness, and we're going to have electric school buses and not have wood-burning fireplaces. Well, they don't really care about that. They care about advancing their goals. And I think our leaders have us way distracted on tremendously frivolous, ideological quests. And that's, to me, what's allowing these powers in large part to run circles around us, or at least to give us the feeling that they're running circles around us. And they very well may be.
Well, as Jesse and I have said before, these guys are playing advanced chess, and we haven't even learned how to set up a checkerboard yet. And this is very, very dangerous stuff.
Sputnik.
Listen, we need to wake up and understand the world has changed, and not for the better, and we have to start responding and come up with strategies to confront all these threats. They know what they're doing, and we haven't shown a clue to know what we're doing. Let's take a break. This is Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Christian Brown. We'll be right back.
This is Let the Record Show.
This episode is brought to you by Principles. Are there limits to the U.S. government's debt growth? What will happen if the debts are not curtailed? What should policymakers or investors do? Those are urgent questions that legendary investor and New York Times bestselling author Ray Dalio addresses in his new book, How Countries Go Broke: The Big Cycle. The book comes out in June and is available for pre-order today, wherever books are sold.
Home means something different to everyone. But with Rocket Mortgage, home can mean even more. It can mean a college education, taming your high-interest debt, even a renovation. We've made it easier than ever to use your home equity. That home you worked so hard for, now it can work hard for you. Call 800-4ROCKET or visit rocket.com to find out more.
Rocket Mortgage, LLC, licensed in all 50 states. NMLSconsumeraccess.org, number 3030.
I already love same-day delivery with Shipt, but it's so much better since I signed up for Target Circle 360. Why? Because I no longer pay price markups from the majority of stores through Shipt. Only a handful of alcohol retailers and items don't count. That means no markups on groceries, pet food, even home goods and makeup. So to recap, I have more time to catch up on life while someone shops for me, and I spend less. It's a win-win. Order now at shipt.com/360. Terms apply.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel? Or that white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We're back on Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party, the County Chair of the Suffolk Republican Party. With us, our guest in the studio is Christian Chris Brown, a noted attorney, commentator, essayist, and I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Gentlemen, shifting gears, I submit to you that the radical agenda of the far left, the progressive left, is a true threat to freedom in America and our national security. And let me say this about that, as Richard Nixon would have said. Let's take this Green New Deal. Let's take this climate obsession nonsense. You need to have energy and a dependable source of energy to have a viable economy for people to live a high quality of life, to have heat in the winter, to have air conditioning in the summer, to have your appliances work, to have your vehicles move. So when they come up with ideas that solar and wind is going to do the job, they're kidding themselves and they're trying to schnooker the American people. The grid cannot sustain the energy needs of this country right now. It's barely doing it properly now. When you cut out coal and natural gas and fossil fuels, then you certainly can't do it. The grid cannot sustain the cars. And by the way, the batteries for the cars and all the natural resources for the cars and the chips, you know where they come from? They come from our enemy, China. So the obsession that they have that everything has to be changed means one thing and one thing only. We're going to go back to the dark ages. And unless you have energy independence, you have a national security threat, and everybody else is producing oil. Our enemies, Venezuela or Russia, they're supplying the oil. They hold other countries dependent on them. We're not producing enough to do it ourselves, even though we have more than enough energy if we would just drill and do what we have to do. The next step, of course, will have to be to use nuclear power, but a lot of these new Green Dealers do not see nuclear as viable because it's not green enough for them. They're talking about a climate crisis, which is hundreds, maybe thousands of years away. It's not going to be a big issue. Right now, we're watching the world being gobbled up by our enemies, and we're dismantling unilateral disarmament of our energy independence and dependence on others. And the oil that we're getting, for example, from Venezuela is dirtier oil than we're producing. And when you go into the strategic reserves and dismantle that, as Biden did, we're not going to have it for a true crisis. This is very serious stuff. And I just want to tell you about one case that's just popped up, gentlemen, which is of enormous concern to me. In the state of Hawaii, a case before the Supreme Court of the state of Hawaii, the highest court in that state, said that counties and cities have a right to bring lawsuits against Sunoco, a leading oil company, for so-called failure to protect against climate change or energy problems, even though those energy problems are caused outside the territorial jurisdiction of the state of Hawaii, and they've granted that right for them to sue. Now, this is a case that could very well go and should go to the Supreme Court of the United States. They're right now drafting a petition for certiorari, which means for leave to appeal by the Supreme Court. I will say to commend the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit here in New York. On a similar theory, they rejected that as absolute total nonsense. How can you hold an oil company responsible for worldwide pollution that may not have occurred and likely did not occur here in New York or in the state of Hawaii and Hawaii? It could be coming from, how about India and China? Because if there is pollution to the atmosphere, if there are carbon excesses, guess what? It moves across territorial lines. What say you, Jesse?
I think that if anybody of any common sense approach, or just an average American, wants to see the benefits or what the results are of progressive laws and legislation and policies, visit California, walk the streets of New York. The streets of New York, you can be walking as innocently to a deli and get punched in your face. If you go down to the subway to go from one borough to another, you may or may not survive. You certainly have a great prospect of being robbed. If you want to be an entrepreneur or visit this wonderful city of ours, this once wonderful city of ours, the liberals in Albany are going to charge you another couple of $30-$40 for driving your car in.
Congestion pricing. Congestion pricing.
And congestion pricing, exactly. We see California, where the policies of climate change are crippling their economy, and the only thing they're advancing is their exportation of their population. Ironically, just like New York. I'm not sure what the people of Hawaii are thinking. I'm not sure what these elected officials who initiated this legislation are thinking. I thank God that the founders of this country established the federal court systems and the Supreme Court so that we could straighten out idiocies like this bill. Like this legislation that has been put forward that allows, climate change, green type of, zealots to sue corporations for a lifetime of changes in our climate. It's just wrong. Anybody that ever says, we talk about the progressive agenda, whether it's Hawaii, New York, California. Now it seems that these blue states are trying to just shrink the middle class or export the middle class to different states so that they become a state of elitists and those who are dependent upon the government for survival, basically a nanny state. So all I say is that I'm hopeful that the Supreme Court will take this case up, just like it took up cases, not to mix apples and oranges, but, we had the progressives in different states like Colorado say that President Trump was not able to be a candidate or placed on the ballot. The U.S. Supreme Court came in, cleaned up the progressives' mess again, and that moved forward. I hope that they see the common sense to clean this mess up again as it progresses, because that's not going to be an issue for us. When it comes to green energy or these progressive type of policies, these are where the progressive Democrats, whether it be in state houses or D.C., they are driven by their partisan politics, a 30-second soundbite, and this is the only time when they say, leave science to the side. Because anybody who looks at science, like they told us during COVID, if you look at science, you can understand that technology is not caught up to what they want us to do with these mandates, whether it be to eliminate natural gas from new construction, to mandate electric school buses that school districts throughout the state of New York are saying are 5 times the cost of their current bus fleets, and they use arbitrary deadlines. The progressives are wrong. The progressives are unhinged, and it's going to take the American people and the people of New York to rise up to stop them.
Chris.
Well, I agree with you. The green policies are amongst the worst and most foolish hobby horses of our mass, ideological elites, or whatever you want to call them. They mean nothing to the average person. They do nothing to better the lives of everyday, to use Hillary Clinton's term, New Yorkers or Americans. In fact, they just make their lives more burdensome and more difficult. And they achieve really no results. I mean, the idea that the city of New York has a climate policy is totally preposterous. They're going to put enormous costs on middle-class people living in co-op buildings in Queens to achieve what? Absolutely nothing, except putting more costs on middle-class people who live in co-op buildings in Queens. It has no effect on the environment. That's ridiculous. We have tremendous natural resources just in this state alone. Well, we're not allowed to tap them. They don't want natural gas lines coming in to bring cheap clean energy into Brooklyn. No, you can't have that. Well, 10 years ago, they said, get away from oil, use natural gas. Well, that's great because we have a lot of natural gas and it's cheap and it's clean. No, now that's no good. Indian Point nuclear power plant, nope, that had to go too. So where exactly is the power supposed to come from? We are weakening ourselves. We are wasting enormous amounts of political capital and other resources on these crazy ideas that don't better anybody's lives. I'm all for progress. Not a progressive, but I'm for progress. You know, science, technology moves forward over time. It gets better over time. You don't need the government to mandate that tomorrow you should have an electric school bus. Maybe there'll be a day when we have electric school buses, when the technology allows for it. Just look at the differences in cars over the last 20 or 30 years. They're better, they're safer, there's more doodads in them than you could ever have imagined before. But that's a natural development as companies adjust, as technology advances. You can't have the government tell you, what sort of a light bulb you should screw in on the idea that that's somehow going to stop the ocean from rising. So we can make fun of it, but it's quite a serious problem because it's wasting a lot of time and it's causing a lot of burdens. And I would just close by saying I heard the other day, I think it was on this radio station, that their vaunted CHIPS Act, that's going to bring chip manufacturing to upstate New York. They have been warned by the grid operator that there is not enough electricity in the grid to power those factories. I don't know. I don't think you're going to power them by building 25 windmills off of Montauk.
Well, let's switch gears, gentlemen. I just want to, before we get to some of the stuff that's going on in the state legislatures, they keep working to try to get a budget. I just want to make the following comment. The illegal migrant crisis is getting worse by the day. Chris and I, as we entered the studio today, had a chat with Mayor Giuliani, who's preparing to do his own show on WABC. And Rudy raised the important question. And Jess and I have talked about this between ourselves and amongst other guests. Even if you stopped at midnight tonight, all the illegal immigration, what are you going to do with the millions of people who have jumped in here illegally? How do you get them out? How do you protect against those threats of the cartels, of the gangs, of the potential terrorists? How do you deal with that? This is a big deal. The one person who's led the charge in America to fight, to protect America, not just his own state of Texas, but to fight to protect the state of Texas and America, is Governor Greg Abbott. And he is fighting to do that because he realizes it's not just Texas's fight, because these people jump into Texas and they move throughout the country. And we have fifth columnists, enemies of this country, who are working now secretly, clandestinely, against the best interests of the American people in this great country. And there's going to be a decision out of the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit saying whether or not the state law of Texas, which would give the power to police authorities in Texas to arrest and detain and then move out of our country these illegal, and they are illegal, they have no right to be here, they are illegal migrants. They are not entitled to the color protection of U.S. law. They should not be here. The law is very, very clear that it'd be stopped, that it'd be detained, and that it'd be kept out of this country pending a hearing. They have no right to be released into this country pending a hearing. It's awful. I hope Governor Abbott wins that case in the Fifth Circuit. If not, if it goes to the Supreme Court, I hope he wins there. And he does have the constitutional right under the United States Constitution. He has concurrent power to enforce the laws of the federal government with the federal government, particularly since the Biden administration has failed to protect and defend this country. I want to turn this over to Chris now, because we're doing through the budget process, and Jesse and Chris understand this very, very well about what's going on. But Chris, I want to ask you, I keep thinking about all these bad ideas that are coming out of the state legislature, and one of them is this so-called equal rights ballot proposal that's going to go on the ballot in November. And you're a lawyer on that case. Would you tell us about it?
Yeah, so the legislature passed through the constitutional amendment process a so-called, what they call the Equal Rights Amendment. And what it basically does is add a bunch of terms to the state constitution. The state constitution has already an equal rights provision, an anti-discrimination provision. This amendment to it would add a whole slew of terms as to sort of these, what they call protected classes. They include adding the terms sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, pregnancy outcomes, and reproductive health care and autonomy. Now, what that means, I don't know, but supposedly you aren't able to discriminate against people on the basis of those
Well, let me ask you this.
terms.
But based on the ambiguity of these terms, does this mean that a biological male who identifies as a female can go in to a woman's bathroom at a gymnasium under this?
Well, that appears to be the result. I mean, again, it's hard to understand what this is really about, but
It certainly will lead to a lawsuit
Of
on
course.
that.
And if you look at what's happening now in Nassau County, where the county executive, Bruce Blakeman, said that he would not permit transgender athletes to compete on, transgender girls to be on girls' sports teams, if I'm saying that correctly. And the Attorney General, Letitia James, has come down on him and said, that's illegal. You can't do that. That's under existing law. So I can only imagine that it would be the position of the state of New York, the Attorney General, that the language in this amendment would further reinforce the legal basis to say that you cannot discriminate against a trans player on a sports team, for example.
Okay, Jesse, that's the legal discussion that Chris and I just had. From a political discussion, Jesse, and you're the expert on politics, isn't this nothing but a naked grab to bring out the Democratic vote in the November elections in New York State?
Absolutely. It's a clear naked grab, like all of their legislation. It's not to help anybody. As was pointed out, there's existing law that the Attorney General has cited in opposing County Executive Blakeman's order preventing trans athletes in women's sports. This is nothing more than pure politics. It's politics at its worst. We already have these laws in place that protect and stop discrimination. This is actually, and you pointed it out, Your Honor. Let's just be fathers and mothers, parents, grandparents. Do we want someone that on one occasion, 1 hour to the next, identifies as a woman, a male, to go into a woman's bathroom? Do we want men to compete against our daughters in sports and deny them possible credit for their sacrifices and their training and maybe even scholarships? This is just wrong. And this, by far, it's always the race card and this card that the Democrats play. They're not for unifying this country. Everything they do, every part of their calculus is to divide this country and to try and stoke more disunity amongst us. It's something that really needs to stop. But until it's proven that there cannot be successful anymore at this, they're going to continue it. And that's something that we need to take up as a people. Honestly, this is just bad. It's bad for our state. It's bad for our country. There's already existing laws protecting individuals from discrimination. And this is just further divides a very polarized, citizenry in our state and our country.
I want to raise another issue for Chris and you. There's a bill up in Albany. It's called Good Cause Eviction. The Democrats are very, very good at slogans and labeling and narrative. Good cause eviction sounds absolutely wonderful. People shouldn't be evicted unless there's good cause. But fundamentally, what this bill does is it imposes universal rent control across the whole state of New York. Okay, and number two, it fundamentally disables landlords from throwing out undesirable tenants. We already have sufficient laws to protect tenants against poor conduct by landlords and discriminatory conduct. And landlords have to make a return on their investment, otherwise they abandon the property and the Bronx will burn again. And it also discourages building housing. These are stupid laws, and yet they get to frame it as they're doing something good. It will drive the middle class out of our state. Chris.
Well, this is yet another example of just Albany at its worst. Now, first of all, this is being done yet again in a back room. No one knows what is going to be in this legislation. This is how these people operate on matters of great public importance. They hide it for weeks in these secretive negotiations. The public has no idea what's in the bill, and a bunch of interest groups get together and concoct something that inevitably is a disaster. We've had rent control in the city of New York since the end of World War II. And since the end of World War II, they've told us that we are in a housing crisis. I don't understand what they're talking about. The judge says the Bronx are burning. Well, that was Ed Koch's housing crisis. Now we have another housing crisis. And so their answer to it is more rent control. Now let's have rent control statewide. No, this is a terrible idea. And the idea that the governor doesn't stand up and say, absolutely not. No one walking down the street outside this studio right now is thinking about good cause eviction. They are worried about crime. They are worried about illegal immigration. They're annoyed about congestion pricing. Who is asking for the state legislature to waste such an enormous amount of time on something that no one in the city of New York or the state of New York is asking for? And that solves nothing. It only makes the housing crisis worse. If you want to solve the housing crisis, let people build houses.
And don't create a disincentive to build or to maintain your property.
Exactly.
I do want to add one more item to that discussion. There is a comprehensive 4-piece legislative package on this issue that truly protects the American dream. It protects tenants and it protects the property owners. A state senator from Suffolk County and an amazing man, Mario Matera from the 2nd District, he has put forward a 4-bill package that's robust, comprehensive, and truly protects the American dream for homeowners, landlords. And it came as a result of these secret negotiations, but something very, very simple. Squatters were now just not only taking over homes, they were basically stealing them from the elderly, from their rightful owners who maybe have gone away for maybe down south for Florida for the winter, or the elderly and such, to the point where back in late 2023, one of his former union members, he was the head of the local plumbers union, 200 here in Suffolk County. One of his plumbers went to go turn on or turn off the water. I forget what it is, but they went on a house call, and this man was viciously beaten. Fox News just had a full story on this. He has been on national news, Senator Mario Matera, on his squatters and bill, and it's and package of 4 bills. It is pro-tenant, it is pro-landlord, it is pro-American dream, because it stops these squatters from basically stealing the homes of the elderly and the property owner. And we've seen violence ensue from these incidents. This plumber, who now spent months in the hospital because he was beaten with a bat, is still trying to get on his feet. What about his family? What about the families of others? A young man, a farmer in Utah that was lost and was missing since 2022, and his body was just found. And how the squatter that lived next to him led authorities to where his body was buried. You know, if to those people, to those New Yorkers who are looking to protect their homes, protect their top investment, Mario Matera's got a package of robust bills that protects the American dream and protects those properties.
Thank you, Jesse. Well, an hour always goes quickly when we're talking amongst ourselves on these issues and sharing it with our audience. Jesse Garcia, the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party, County Chair of Suffolk County, my very good friend and co-host. Christian Brown, our esteemed guest, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist. I want to thank you for joining Jesse and me today. This has been Let the Record Show. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation as much as we've enjoyed being with you. Tune in again next week on Let the Record Show for more interesting and important conversation. Thank you for listening.
Let the Record Show is on the air.